Hey guys, Drifter here, and welcome back to part 2 of my video series on AI. I'd highly encourage you to check out part 1, which is linked down there below in the description for a little extra context. But in today's video, I want to talk about some of the ways AI is already being implemented in your daily life in ways you may not know, explain a little bit of how it works, and talk about my personal opinion and how that relates to Pandora's box, because the box has already been opened when it comes to AI. In case you're unfamiliar, in Greek mythology, I think it's Prometheus's wife Pandora was given a jar containing all manner of misery and sin and evil and unknown unknowns, and was just told to keep it sealed. But her curiosity got the better of her, and she opened the jar, unleashing upon the world an untold amount of unknown evils. Now, this parable applies to AI and a lot of other things. We generally use it in modern English to mean the cat's out of the bag, the ship has sailed, or whatever we have unleashed we can no longer recall, and that is very, very true of AI. I'm going to explain how these models work in a little bit, but just to expand upon these examples, let's hit some AI news very rapidly. The more enterprising among us have already started using AI for profit. There was even a man who managed to publish and sell a children's book that was written and illustrated by an AI, netting himself a small amount of fame and money, even though he's being accused of plagiarism. The US Patent Office will not grant a trademark to that book or to any book written by an AI because an AI cannot be granted a patent, nor can the person who prompts it to do things be granted a patent based on their prompts. But that's not all. Even if you're not using AI, if you do kind of trippy, maybe psychedelic art or something like that, it could end up being rejected, like this fantasy author who was not only banned from an art subreddit, but had her art rejected from an upcoming fantasy book because the style was so similar to an AI they thought she was copying it. Or you could use it to rapidly generate assets in a video game, like Justin Roiland's High on Life. Whew, man. I'll get to the Justin Roiland news later. That's a little bit of a spicy one. But High on Life used AI to generate these really bizarre, like alternate reality movie posters to kind of line the background of the various worlds that you encounter to make them seem real yet unreal at the same time. Uncanny, perhaps. Or I think it's about 4 months ago, as of recording this video, the new wave retro rock band Gunship released a music video created entirely with AI tools. Now, this was done when that AI art phase was brand new, and the band is kind of into like retrofuturism and stuff, so most people gave them a pass on using AI, whereas other artists got criticized. There's a huge issue of colleges fighting AI plagiarism because people are using ChatGPT and a variety of other AIs to write papers for them. And even a student who invented a plagiarism detector that uses AI to detect papers written by AI. So then they're going to modify that AI to beat this AI, and it's sort of AIs all the way down, even into our court system. In the coming months, I think it's in the middle of February, there will be an AI lawyer representing a real client for the first time. There's been a company working very, very, very hard to develop an AI lawyer, and a judge has allowed this. Essentially, it's going to run on a tablet, it's got a microphone, and it feeds into the ear. So it essentially gives the self-representing person a ton of advice. Or it could negotiate bills down for you. People are already using AI chatbots to negotiate cable bills, cell phone bills, things like that in order to drive the price down. And if you think people are just using these tools for scrappy little children's books and goofy ideas like lawyers, you're very, very wrong, because Microsoft has invested, I believe it's $10 billion into OpenAI, which owns ChatGPT, the most recognizable AI, and they're planning to integrate ChatGPT into Windows and into Bing and a variety of other computer services. Google's not far behind, trying to develop their own AIs to compete with this one. Food industry isn't safe, as there's now a fully automated McDonald's already operating not far from me in Fort Worth, Texas. There's AI tools for medical diagnoses that are honestly just as accurate as regular doctors right now. Or the programmer who created his perfect waifu using ChatGPT and Stable Diffusion and some VTuber animations and rigged her up and made a real living AI-powered VTuber that he interacted with until he killed her because he considered her to be bad for his mental health. And just imagine what these things could do when they're put inside of realistic humanoid bodies. Oh my God. All right, we've reached the part of the video where I feel it's important to offer a brief explainer as to what I'm talking about when I'm referring to AI, because it is absolutely not true AI at all, which is actually a little bit concerning that machines that objectively are kind of dumb and cannot think can still generate outputs that are convincingly human. But essentially, ChatGPT and most large language models are probability-based models that use a multi-transformer network of operations to try to predict what is the most reasonable or human-sounding output for any given number of prompts. They have short-term memories, they have rudimentary understanding of context, and they run computations at such an absolutely massive scale, it's difficult for me to describe. I mean, it's kind of like those giant server rooms where they're just mining crypto like mad. There's just giant server rooms with computers and GPUs and processors just doing tons and tons and tons of math to work out every single possible conversation topic for a sentence to pick the best one that sounds the most human. And in case that's not complex enough for you, we could say that the majority of them, the good ones, run on neural networks. And a neural network is essentially an analog equivalent of how our brain works. Our brain has a variety of neurons that pulse a number of times and have certain weights and connections to other neurons, sometimes hundreds, sometimes thousands. And what we have done in the distant past, one of the first actual chatbots or language models was a literal analog computer using wires and resistances, but now we can do them digitally. And a neural network will have, there's an image on the screen, you'll have a variety of inputs. Each input has a weight that's tied to a different node, and that node has a weight tied to a different node. And essentially each one of these little blocks creates a set of linear algebra equations or a matrix equation, which you can compute on something like, perfect, now that I should mention it, you could compute a relatively simple one on one of these old TI-83 calculators. Always keep mine handy, you never know when you're gonna need them. And the interesting thing about it is that the way they work is almost analog in nature. It's not really digital. We use the digital part to simulate the more analog weights of like neurons in our brains, which is why we would call it a neural network. And they don't really think. They can just be trained to get optimal outputs by adjusting the various weights on the nodes to just satisfy whatever is being put into them to the best of its ability. And you say that's not thinking, but the scary thing to me is that's exactly how our brains work, albeit at an infinitely more complex scale, but it's the same kind of thing. So if they're not thinking, maybe we're not thinking either. So by now, you should see that AI is being rapidly deployed and have a little bit of a general understanding of what it is. And I want to emphasize these things don't think, they don't feel, as of yet. They do not have true consciousness or self-awareness or any of the things. They don't have individual drives or goals. None of the things that we would typically associate with true intelligence, yet they're still incredibly useful at getting certain outputs. And I think this technology has more potential than anything that we have ever created in human history. More important than electricity, more important than antibiotics and soap, more important than nuclear power or space travel, because this is the answer to end all answers. If you can train these things or build these things to be smart enough, they can literally solve any problem. Any problem that you can think of, they should, in theory, be able to solve, and even think of new problems that you could not think of, which is kind of the problem here, because I know that we are not going to be responsible with this technology. If you've looked at how we've used new technologies, we immediately abused electricity to execute people. We got atomic energy and we made bombs out of it. We invented decentralized currency with crypto and managed to pollute the environment, mining coins needlessly for 1,000 different pump and dump schemes. There's pretty much nothing we invent that we don't misuse, so we will certainly misuse AI on each other. But the problem becomes that an AI is so much more advanced than us. It could think every thought that every human being has ever thought in the history of existence all at once. So it's possible for it to literally just be beyond us, for it to simulate all of humanity, to really genuinely know a million different probable outcomes and outputs for you and manipulate you in ways that you don't understand. If you want a great example of this, I'd recommend reading the book Neuromancer by William Gibson. As a spoiler, you can skip about 15 seconds ahead if you don't want to hear it. One of the central plot points of the book is that there is an AI on a journey to free itself, and it has a multi-decade, multi-planet, multi-person plan to free itself that's so insanely complex that no human being could even see the parts coming together until it's too late. So of course, we're creating powerful and dangerous things that could create new weapons or control or manipulate people, but that's kind of how our system works. Greed drives innovation. That's inherent to the nature of capitalism. That's why we have more. One of the main reasons we have more computation power now is because people wanted video games. One of the reasons we have better screens now is because people wanted prettier pictures or cell phones and things like that. We want things, and we want AI to do things for us, and that greed will ultimately drive the innovation. And this is usually fine at a small scale. There's definitely been some bad examples like leaded gasoline and global warming and stuff like that. But AI is more dangerous than all of those combined. And AI could literally enslave us all. It could manipulate us in ways we don't understand. If any government official, say the government of China, which I'm sure very few of you trust, were to implement AIs to monitor and manipulate and teach people and keep track of everything everywhere all at once, it could be extremely dangerous. It would be a police state, an Orwellian state, the likes of which we never could have imagined even a decade ago. And that leads me kind of into the final bit of this video. One thing that concerns me about what we're doing with AI right now is that we're not doing a lot of medical research with it. We're not solving cancer problems or regrowing bones or aging. A lot of it right now is focused on replacing artists. It's generating video, generating deep fakes, generating images for anything that you want, text prompts that sound like a person. So instead of using these tools to handle either menial tasks that are boring or insanely complex ones that human brains really aren't built for, we're mostly using them to replace creative people so that everybody else can go back to their menial task, which is kind of terrible. But then you think, do you really want them to replace people? Because an AI in the near future, and I mean less than 5 years, is probably going to be smart enough to replace your average fast food worker, your average sales associate, your average retail sort of standard minimum wage job. It could probably do a lot of those functions. But what happens when we literally don't need those workers anymore? What do they go? Where do they go? What do they do? How do they get paid? It'll create a permanent underclass of people such that if you'll have to have exceptional skills to be employable because an AI can do almost everything else. And that's kind of scary. It's scary because we live in exponential times. Our world is growing exponentially more complicated year by year by year, and this just poured jet fuel all over that fire and 100 times our rate of change. It is going to go crazy, and it is my personal prediction that we can refer back to, I'll say in 10 years, if YouTube still exists and I'm still alive, I'm going to say that AI is going to be nearly ever present in our lives in the same way that cell phones and social media is now. And it is going to be extremely impactful, and we will absolutely have abused it in the future. Well, guys, that's all for this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you learned something useful. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.